All right, ladies and gentlemen, patch 1.36 is live. We talked about it a lot on the PTR when it was on the test servers. Now it's on the live version, so everyone can use the new features. That is the observer mode and the automated tournaments, and the balance patches have come through as well. Let's talk about how the patch hit. There was a scheduled maintenance yesterday closely after midnight, so I stayed up after the ESLM cast to see and test everything, because of course we have our own overlay. We need to check if everything is fine, and we made some adjustments for the new overlay. I wanted to see if everything is fine. Plus, it's also very exciting if new things come in, and we weren't sure if all the patches on the PTR, all the changes on the PTR came through. So the patch hit, and it was quite wonky. It was kind of plagued with bugs, unfortunately. First and foremost, you couldn't log in from the European region. It was then possible via the Americas region. Maybe a little note for next time. Then also on this new patch, they reduced the vetoes for the ladder from first, they wanted to introduce 5 vetoes, but then they dialed it back to 3. On the live version, there was initially 5 vetoes, which could have led to a situation where we have 10 maps in the pool, one player vetoes 5, the other player vetoes 5, and then there's no map left. So that was also fixed very quickly. New bugs were introduced, unfortunately, because there's a new observer mode. You all saw it probably. The UI can look a lot cleaner without any tools or third-party programs. You have a nice way of watching Warcraft games now. That observer mode introduced a hotkey on F3 that disables the minimap. F3 is unfortunately also the hotkey for your third hero when you play the game. And we had a situation where the observer mode hotkey for disabling the minimap collided and has overwritten the F3 hotkey for the hero. So a lot of people couldn't select their third hero with that key. That was a big problem as well. And then there was another issue that comes with balance. So we have to talk a little bit about what was changed balance-wise. We talked a lot about this on the PTR, and not too much has changed in that. So for example, immolation is still from the last version. The damage has been removed, not removed, reduced. Sentinel research cost also 50-50. Everything here stays the same, including the stronger arcane tower on heroes, so it does more damage and drains more mana. Knights are a little bit weaker. Headhunters still lose their HP in Headhunter form, also in Berserker form. Cannibalize is still easier to acquire, etc. They made claws a little weaker. They made mana potions and stones a little weaker. Now we come to the items, and here things get quite interesting. On the last version of the PTR, they deleted this Circlet of Nobility from the drop table. You could still buy it from the merchant, but you couldn't find it anymore. Circlet is now back on the menu, but has been moved up an item level, which means you find it now on spots where you have a Period of Vitality, for example. Then all the rings of protection has been moved down a level. That means you find them earlier at lower level camps. For example, a ring of protection +3 that was previously to be found at a camp with claws +5 can now be found at a camp with with Mantle of Intelligence. Same goes for the ring +4 from 3 to 2 was previously an item that you can find with the ring of with a Period of Vitality, now at a spot that can also drop you a claw. Ring of Protection +5 was a level 6 item that was only found at the Twisted Meadow starting positions, and that is now a level 3 item, which is a lot easier to acquire, same spot as the Circlet, for example. And this leads to a problem. I'm not talking balance-wise, game design-wise. I'm talking just simple issues. Because they did change the item levels, But what they did not change is the value of these items. And that created a huge problem yesterday night. And we take the ring +5 as the example here. It was a level 6 item. The item cost for a level 6 item is 600 gold. So if it's in the marketplace, it's 600 gold. You can sell it for 70% of that value, 60 or 70% of that value. That means that's a lot of gold. All other items of level 3, except the period, sell for 300. So selling a ring +5 gave you a lot more gold than, for example, a claws +8. And so you would be really lucky to find a ring because you can sell it and then you have a lot of gold. Also, Ring of Archmage gives more gold. That's the new item for level 4. Gives a lot more gold than the other items of that spot. Everybody was raving about this and hating on it and yada yada. They fixed it. This is not the case anymore. They fixed it in like 4 hours. All good. Very fine. We will discuss this if this is good or not. If the ring and circlet drop table is good this way, because this is something that we haven't had on the PTR, not to this extent. Circlet moved up a level, all the rings moved down a level. This in general makes heroes a lot more tanky versus physical damage, because you get more armor, more early, and also there's a chance for the ring +5 to drop early now. So in general, you have a lot of rings. In this discussion prior to the patch, everybody was talking about the lowering of damage, with the claws being nerfed, with the circlet being harder to acquire. And nobody really liked this. This opens up a lot more plays for heroes, especially in the early game. If your hero is very tanky in the early game, he's not taking that much damage, so he can hang around longer and harass a lot longer. That's just logical, right? And you can stack armor quite a bit as well. So instead of getting, for example, a Blade Master with 2 claws that's just cutting everything to pieces, you might get a Blade Master with 10 armor at the 3.5 minute mark that you just can't deal with in the early game. Or it's hard to deal with in the early game, except moving away from it. I think it's always a lot more fun to do damage than to tank. So people might not appreciate that immediately. But in general, I don't hate it. The rings have been buffed a lot, and they needed to be buffed a lot, because rings don't help you with creeping. They help a lot with harassing, but they don't help with creeping because they don't add higher damage. There is some corner cases, of course, like Blade Master Mirror Image, where you could then tank more damage on an illusion, etc. But that's not the case. That is not what we talk about here. So this ring change comes out of the blue. Could theoretically lead to very OP heroes very early. But for now, after the first day and seeing a couple of games, it feels all right. It feels better in comparison than the damage stacking. Circlet being a level 3 item almost feels a little weak compared to Claws +8, Pendant of Energy, etc. But Circlet of Nobility is a really strong item. It basically moves the stats of your hero up 1 level. So all of this it needs to be tested. It's very hard to theory craft about this. A thing about Ring of Protection is that item sell value has not been changed, so you can return it for less gold than the other items at that drop table. But it's very hard to deal with that because you could increase the sell value now, but that would lead to a case where the circlet that you can buy at the shop is also more expensive, which would then make it almost impossible to get it early on, as a Blade Master does at the moment, as the Demon Hunters did for a long time. You know what I'm saying. So that's big changes to early games. We know that changes to the early games always have a bigger ripple effect than late game changes have. What I absolutely love is that the ring +5 was moved away from the level 6 drop table because it was ridiculous. Like, you get a Amulet of Spell Shield or ring +5. It was obviously imbalanced. In general, I tend to like this, but we gotta be a little careful if the strength and tankiness of heroes is not too good now. Spell damage, still good against them, of course. Ring doesn't reduce spell damage, so that's all fine. This shows again, because they lowered the level and didn't change the item cost, that the developers at the moment that are working on this game don't have the biggest knowledge about this game. So I think if we talk about balance and we talk about changes, we have to explain it like I'm 5. This is what I did in my bug report, or at least try to. We play this game for 20 years. For us, a lot of things we take for granted. A lot of things that are logical to us, are natural to us. These guys at Playside, they work on a lot of games at the same time. They probably don't play this game much. They listen to the community and they listen well. They bring in a little bit of their own flavor as well, which oftentimes is not that great. But we as a community, we need to explain it better to them and make it easier for them to realize why changes were bad or why changes are necessary. That's my call to everybody who makes suggestions, who makes posts on the forums. Eli 5 should be the way to go here. And yeah, this is interesting times. We learned also in patch 1.35, when Demon Hunter was very, very, very strong at the beginning, that they are watching, they are listening, and if these ring changes and circlet change turns out to be bad, I'm very sure they are willing to revert it because they did it before. It's not like the old Blizzard team that never really wanted to revert changes because that shows weakness, that shows that they made mistakes, and they were never willing to do it. They would rather do 5 other changes to fix one of their mistake. This is not the case with this team. So I think we have a good chance here of fine-tuning what we have right now. There's one little thing in Observer mode that wasn't fixed, and that is the HP bar of heroes when you select them. That doesn't grow, but apart from that, I'm now very, very happy with the Observer mode, as I said in my PTR version. I'm skeptical about the tournaments. I felt like yesterday there was the first tournament. Maybe it was because the patch was so fresh, but it felt like some wins weren't tracked correctly. Some games didn't create. So yeah, very, very skeptical about this. What I'm very happy about is that they fixed this one here, Bliss hide origin frames crashed the game. That saves a lot of custom games. I also like that they changed, that was a hotfix. Let me switch this real quick. They changed the chat in custom game lobbies. There was a lot of instances where you just dropped out of chat and had to refocus on this. This is apparently changed. This is good. The F3 issue is changed. The gold cost. The hotfix was really good. And seeing this hotfix being deployed 4 hours after the initial patch hit was also very good. And okay, maybe that tournament issue that I talked about is also fixed. We gotta observe this. In general, I dislike that they implement big changes like the like multiplayer big, like the item level movement without putting it on PTR first. I would have loved to discuss this before sending it to live, but I guess we treat this version as another iteration of the PTR, but with more players. We can always switch this around. This can spark some interesting discussions of rearranging the drop tables as a whole, and also spark a discussion if different items from one drop table should have different sell costs. For example, should a claw +4 have a lower resell value than a gloves because the claws is universally better? That adds complexity to the game that might not be necessary, but it might balance out items in a way. Might lead to something. So at the moment, I am very, very careful in giving my opinion about this because I have seen 6 games, and in mirror matches, in this Orc mirror match I saw, Blade Master looked really strong with a lot of claws. In other matchups, it didn't decide too much. It takes away a little bit of flavor from the game because we got a lot of rings now that are almost the same except the value. So it's not as colorful. But I don't hate it. Initial thought, I don't hate it. We will observe this. Maybe strength and agility heroes will become very strong. Maybe intelligence heroes get a little buff because they survive more chip damage and better harass. I think this is something that is very hard to predict in Theorycraft, and we have to look at the amazing games that we see at the moment. So that's my initial review. I'm very happy they respond and they hotfix. Of course, it would be better to not have bugs in it at all, but they fixed everything without like 4 hours or something when Asia was asleep and Europe was asleep as well. So sorry, NA, but that was a kind of good time to fix it. Yeah, I'll keep you up to date. I will discuss the rest with my Twitch stream now, and we see each other later.